I think the most important aspect of this discussion is what's creating susceptibility to viral infections. That should be, the focus of research right now, rather than vaccines, which they admit have adverse events. They say that vaccine injuries are rare, but just my opinion, we should be talking about, again, what's creating susceptibility to viruses.
There is a serious and evolving conversation about vaccines and autism taking place in the United States, with the CDC recently revising its website to acknowledge that the claim vaccines do not cause autism isn't actually evidence-based, and that the Health and Human Services has launched a major investigation into potential biological links. To unpack some of the most recent and groundbreaking science, I'm joined by Matthew Cormier, an independent medical researcher with over a decade of experience studying neurological conditions, viral infections, and autism. His recent work was just peer-reviewed and published in the Journal of Independent Medicine, titled Vaccine-Induced Viral Reactivation and Autism Spectrum Disorder, a Review, Hypothesis, and Implications. His research proposes that dormant viral infections may play a role in autism, and that vaccinations could perhaps trigger a reactivation of those dormant viruses, contributing to neuroinflammation and neurodevelopmental changes associated with autism spectrum disorder, or ASD.
I got into medical research specifically about 12 years ago due to my own health problems. Trying to figure out what was going on inside of me, and I wasn't getting a lot of answers through different doctors, holistic practitioners, etc. So I thought it was important to kind of become versed and be able to read and interpret medical literature on my own.
Though Matthew's journey started with a personal need to understand his own health, it quickly expanded into investigating autism and how viral infections may play a role in neurological conditions, leading up to now, where his research has officially been published.
It's a huge accomplishment, and I'm very grateful to the Independent Medical Alliance and the Journal of Independent Medicine as well for publishing my research. Specifically with this topic, it's received a lot of publicity over the last few years, and I thought I had something significant I could contribute based on my education and my background. When it comes to the relationship between vaccines and as to whether or not they play a causal role in the development of autism, there's obviously some variables because not all children develop autism after receiving vaccines. So the goal of my research was to establish, hypothetically speaking, if vaccines can trigger autism, how? What children are at risk? That led me into basically an investigation onto the etiology of autism. What is autism? What causes autism? When I started that investigation and I started inquiring and researching, I came across a pretty significant body of research implicating viral infections as playing a central role in the development of autism. There's research dating back to the 1970s on what's known as congenital rubella infection, where pregnant women that experienced a severe rubella virus infection, they had a significantly higher likelihood of giving birth to an autistic child. And the research goes on to say that, or imply that congenitally acquired viral infections during pregnancy can disrupt the development of the central nervous system, and that can lead to a later autism diagnosis. Since then, there's been more research that has come out implicating other viruses, but the same relationship, congenitally acquired viral infections and a greater risk of autism in offspring involving herpes family viruses like CMV or herpes simplex type 2. And the research is pretty much the same. A woman contracts a viral infection, either acutely or a reactivation of a virus she's already carrying. The virus crosses the placenta, infects the fetus, and generates an inflammatory pathology in the developing central nervous system. That pretty much sets the stage for an autism diagnosis. That's what the research implies. So from there, I started kind of investigating other aspects of how viral infections could contribute to autism.
Some of the research that Matthew looked at drew a line between viral infections like herpes simplex virus and neurological conditions, where one mechanism at play was viral encephalitis. That's where a virus breaks through the blood-brain barrier and sparks inflammation in the brain. What's striking is that there are well-documented cases of people who were previously neurotypical, kids, teens, and even adults, who developed herpes simplex encephalitis and afterward began showing autistic-like symptoms, eventually meeting diagnostic criteria. This models certain forms of childhood autism, though the timing doesn't fit the usual neurodevelopmental window. And one study found that many autistic children showed markers of active herpes infection, along with brain-targeting autoantibodies, which are antibodies produced by the immune system that mistakenly target and attack the body's own tissues, leading to various autoimmune diseases. Taken together, Matthew argues that all of this research hints that there is something of substance worth looking at here.
Primarily right now, the focus is on the childhood vaccine schedule in relation to an autism diagnosis or acting as a trigger for autism. But there's a lot of research showing that maternal immune activation or viral infections, acute illness during pregnancy, results in a significantly higher risk of having autistic offspring. Now, this really leads into a discussion on the other aspect of my research, which would be vaccine-induced viral reactivation. It's where a person receives a vaccine and it triggers the reactivation of dormant or latent viruses they're already carrying. So the majority of people nowadays are walking around with, say, Epstein-Barr virus or herpes simplex virus or CMV virus. And the immune system does a good job of keeping this virus in check. When it comes to vaccine-induced viral reactivation, vaccines contain adjuvants. When it comes to vaccination and the immune reaction that's elicited, it's generally speaking, it's an allergic reaction. So there's two arms of the immune system. You have a Th1 response, which would be basically the ballpark is cellular immunity, a response to viruses, bacteria, parasites, fungal infections, cancer as well. And then you have the other arm of the immune system, which would be considered Th2. And that's for allergic reactions, toxin exposures, food allergies, environmental allergies. Vaccines tend to skew the immune response to a Th2 dominant state. And when that happens, it undermines the other arm of the immune system, the arm of the immune system responsible for keeping viruses in check that you may already be harboring. So when you look at the research showing how a maternal immune activation and acute illness during pregnancy results in a greater risk of having children with neurodevelopmental disorders, and then we see that vaccines trigger immune activation, they trigger viruses to reactivate, it's very, very concerning. I think it's important to note that my research provides a hypothesis. This isn't conclusive. But what is conclusive is that there is a significant body of research, as you mentioned, implicating common viral infections playing a central role in the development of autism. That's pretty well established. And then there is another side of this research showing that vaccines can reactivate viruses people are already harboring. This can trigger various inflammatory pathologies. But in the context of the discussion on autism, if a vaccine triggers the reactivation of a virus that happens in the central nervous system or in the brain, and it produces viral encephalitis, now we see a correlation. So we have research showing that viral encephalitis can be a trigger for autism. That's well established in medical literature. And then we also have this other body of research suggesting that vaccines could trigger viral encephalitis by reactivating dormant viruses people are already carrying. Most of the research on whether or not there's a causal relationship between vaccines and autism is epidemiology research. So it's observational. The problem is that there's so many confounders and there's so many variables in this discussion that epidemiology research really isn't sufficient. It's not accurate to determine whether or not vaccines play a causal role in the development of ASD.
While these findings don't confirm causation, they spotlight a critical issue. Viral reactivation and immune-driven brain changes may play a bigger role in neurological conditions like autism than we've previously been willing to discuss, until now.
I think discussions are definitely opening up. With Robert F. Kennedy Jr. as head of HHS in the United States and this current administration, it has opened the door for this discussion. As far as where we are in terms of research, I think we have a long way to go. Every disease and condition is multifactorial. So it's about establishing variables and identifying patterns and gaps in current medical literature, and then forming a hypothesis in which you can test. And that was the goal of my research, to identify the variables and put forth a hypothesis. And now we can say, well, are viruses involved in causing autism? Yes or no? Do vaccines reactivate viruses people are already carrying? Yes or no? Is there a link here? And this can be tested. And this safety signal could be validated or falsified. So I think that's really important. The discussion shouldn't really be on vaccine safety. The discussion should be on what creates susceptibility to viral infections, because that's really at the root of this discussion. We can kind of take vaccines out of the equation. When we start talking about virology, I'll give you an example. There's people that were exposed to COVID, SARS-CoV-2 during the pandemic that weren't vaccinated, and let's say they had a partner, their wife or their husband was infected, and they're sleeping in a bed with them, and they're sharing close quarters with them. They have direct exposure to the virus, but they never catch it. They never test positive. Transmission doesn't occur. They don't get sick. And this is in people that weren't vaccinated. When you look at the medical literature, you'll see a lot of similar cases. There's people that are directly exposed to HIV, but transmission doesn't occur. They never test HIV positive. They never develop AIDS. There's people exposed to the cold sore virus directly, but transmission doesn't occur. So really, I think the most important aspect of this discussion is what's creating susceptibility to viral infections. That should be, the focus of research right now, rather than vaccines, which they admit have adverse events. They say that vaccine injuries are rare, but just my opinion, we should be talking about, again, what's creating susceptibility to viruses.
Informed decisions, especially for expecting mothers, demand nuance and transparency. Understanding viral susceptibility may be just as critical as understanding vaccine safety. As AHS, Agency for Healthcare Research report warns, adverse events from vaccines are common but underreported, with less than 1% reported to the Food and Drug Administration. That underreporting problem could obscure real risks. Matthew Cormier's research highlights the urgency of ongoing vigilance and scientific inquiry. As the science evolves, we must remain open to new evidence, carefully weighing the risks and always prioritizing the health of both mother and child. This conversation isn't just important, it's essential. Public health policy must follow the data, not ignore it. For Rebel News, I'm Tamara Ugolini. Across Ontario, parents are being pressured to hand over their children's private medical information, like their vaccine status, under the threat of school suspension. Many families see this as coercive, and in an age of repeated healthcare data breaches, parents have every reason to protect their kids' information from unnecessary solicitation. Education should never be tied to surrendering medical privacy. To learn more about this topic and help expose public health's bullying tactics, please visit stopvaccinecoercion.com. That's stopvaccinecoercion.com.